Welcome to the entrustED. Can you imagine being so committed to the common cause that you put yourself into the political fray, especially during a time when the country has divergent and polarizing views? Imagine being a leader also holding the badge of civil servant and elected political figure at the same time. How do you lead a group of folks who don't really want to be led to begin with? Our next guest knows exactly how to bring diverse voices to the table. Colorado House Representative Shannon Bird has a powerful personal story, too, that she loves to share. And like many of us, she would say she wasn't raised with a silver spoon in her mouth. She got her bachelor's degree at University of Colorado in Boulder, and then a finance degree at CU Denver, and then a Juris Doctorate from University of Denver. And each time she says she left school, she took a snapshot of the job market and decided to get right back into school to keep on learning. She is married and has a daughter in college and a son in high school. And she started her public service, which I think is important, by working as a volunteer with her children's elementary school. Then she first ran for and won a seat on city council serving 2015 to 2019. She then ran for Colorado House Representatives in 2018 and won, and has been successfully reelected 3 times since then. In 2023, she was appointed to the very important Joint Budget Committee, where she did tremendous work on behalf of school finance. And her legislative focus continues to include areas such as affordable housing, healthcare, education, transportation, and public safety. She has been a steadfast champion of children and education and carried and passed a bill to audit the state of Colorado's antiquated accountability system. So when I think of Shannon, some words come to mind: courageous, unflappable, a great listener, and especially for those constituents who need her the most. In today's podcast, Shannon's going to share some of her practical wisdom about how to lead during these polarizing times, and I hope you get a few nuggets of wisdom from it, and thank you, entrustED audience, for joining us. So welcome, Shannon. I'm so glad that you're here with us, and appreciate you spending a little bit of time just having a conversation and talking about some things, and I thought maybe one thing we could kick it off with is just talk a little bit about that journey. You started with the PTA, and now here you are at the state legislature after being reelected 3 times.
Yes.
So talk about that, and what has that been like for you as a leader?
Well, first, let me say thank you for inviting me to join you for this presentation. I'm so excited, and I'm even more excited to know that people are interested in learning more about leadership and what it means to be a leader in your community, wherever that is. So my journey began really by accident in terms of leadership. So you mentioned that I went to law school. I was practicing law. And for most of my attorney colleagues, they will understand when I say, when you're a lawyer, you are so focused on your work that all you can think about is getting your work done. And you really don't have a moment to lift your head and see what's going on in the world around you. Well, when my husband and I had our first child, I had the opportunity to step back, take some time to be home with our kids as we grew our family. And during that time, I had a chance to see that in my community, we had real world needs. So you're right. I started off as a member of our parent-teacher organization, got involved volunteering in my kids' classroom, and then started to notice in Colorado, we don't do a great job funding our schools. What can I do about that? And I will just say that one thing led to another. And I wound up raising my hand to agree, of course, to help the school district run a bond and mill levy override campaign.
Be careful what you volunteer for, right?
Yes. Well, I think one of my, I don't know if this is a failing or an attribute, but I don't say no often enough. And actually, though, I think for me, looking back, I'm glad I did.
Sure.
Every time I've said yes, it's helped me learn more about my world. So I said yes, and we worked to try to raise teacher salaries. We tried to raise funds to help fix our schools. Sadly, we did not make our case to the voters. We lost by 2-1, and my heart was broken. But suffice to say, people saw how hard I had worked on that campaign and how committed I was to our community, and they recruited me to run for our city council. And I will just say I couldn't understand why anybody would ever do that. Why, right? What does a city council even do? I thought primarily we fill potholes and maybe we show up at a few ribbon cuttings once and again. And after a little bit of research, I learned that there's all kinds of things that you can do as a leader in your city.
Yeah,
and I think that's how we met.
That is how we met. And it's so funny. That reminds me, I was laughing because before I became an administrator in education, someone said, I was working hard on a lot of projects, and they said, "Oh, Pam, maybe you should go be an administrator." And I said, "Well, that is so sweet of you to say. What do they do anyway?" Right?
That's right.
Because you hear these titles,
That's right.
and then you don't really understand until you start unpacking that yourself, right? And so the city council, yes, not a lot of people show up under public comment at these things, kind of like board meetings in school districts with lots of positive things to say all the time. So how did you keep your poker face doing that as an election official? Because you're always gracious to people no matter what their opinion is. But sometimes I can't imagine what's going on inside your brain.
Well, I have to say that was an incredible learning opportunity because we don't always agree. And I didn't always agree with my colleagues who I served with on city council. I didn't always agree with comments that people had come in to share with us. But even if you don't agree, I think most of us are raised to understand that you can disagree agreeably and you can be respectful. And the other thing is sometimes I did learn maybe you start off disagreeing, but if you are willing to be curious and understand where another person is coming from, that you can be educated. And I think one of the greatest lessons I've learned as an elected official is I only come into this role with the limited perspective that I have. And it doesn't matter how many books I've read, how many groups I've belonged to. And frankly, even at this point, after having served for at least the last 10 years in my community, I still don't know everything. Haven't talked to enough people. I can still learn. And it's incumbent upon me to always be curious. And that door to learn from other people closes when you don't approach these instances of disagreement with respect. So that has been, I think, just eye-opening, and how I learned to navigate city council and feel I navigate my role in the state legislature similarly.
Yeah, well, and you do it gracefully. You do it without looking like it's bothered you at all, which is a good persona to have, I think, in these situations where you're under the spotlight, so to speak. Because some people can come up under public comments and they can say whatever they want to say, but as the leader, we have to be the adults in the room, right? Can you think of a time when you've had to do that, when someone's brought you something and it's been hard to stomach?
Well, I will just say in our city, there were two massive issues. So, and I bet this is similar in many cities. Don't mess with people's garbage, and be careful when you raise people's water rates. Right. So these are important things. And I think, and also when you make land use decisions, those are big issues also in local government.
In school districts, for sure.
School districts. And I think, again, being respectful, because, this is the case with constituents and also with colleagues with whom I'm serving. We might not agree on this particular instance, but be respectful, try to learn from them. And you still might not get there at the end of the day, but there's going to be 30 other issues that you're going to have to work on. And I might need that constituent's support, and I might need my colleagues' support for any one of those 30 other issues that could have much more impact than the one on which we're disagreeing today. Never burn a bridge, never burn a relationship. And the way you handle situations of disagreement can turn out and make a previous foe your greatest champion later.
Well, that's a good piece of advice, I think, for anyone listening, whether someone's thinking about stepping into a leadership role or already in one, and working with colleagues and maybe thinking about that next stepping stone for where they want to be in their career 3 to 5 years from now. Well, let's talk for a second about some accomplishments you feel like you've been most proud of in your leadership journey, whether that's at the city or volunteering, or whether that's at the State House now, because I know you have a long list. It's like, and this can go on as long as you want.
Well, where I'd like to start is a project that you and I worked on together, Dr. Swanson.
Yeah.
And that was our first bill to require a deep examination of how Colorado evaluates the efficacy of our public schools.
Yes.
That first bill was a bill to audit those accountability, all the tests that we make our kids take. Are they actually working? Are they improving schools for kids? Are they making kids' educational outcomes any better? I will say that that was one of the most contentious bills I have ever run in the Colorado legislature. So that is only to date right now. But that bill in Colorado, and perhaps in other states as well, there are many different strong interest groups that care deeply about public education and
have jobs because of that.
Indeed, they have jobs because of that. So any changes that we make, there were people who were very invested in that accountability system remaining exactly as it was. And if any questions or anything was going to be said about it, it would only be helpful and supportive of those current systems. But the questions I knew and that you knew had to be asked could expose flaws and weaknesses in the current system.
Yeah.
We worked on that bill before the beginning of the 120-day legislative session, and the work and the negotiations on that bill persisted until about the 11th hour of our final day in the legislature. And I think we probably had about 11 different drafts. I kept coming to the table, and trying to find common ground when people were reasonable, even if I really disagreed with them. If they made good points, take those comments and be reasonable. And at the end, the very last round, I don't know that I ever shared this with you, I realized I was finally getting comments from the governor himself.
Yes.
And it was 3 pages, single-spaced. And finally, when we worked our way through that, we had a bill that was passed and celebrated. And now I'll give you an update. This next legislative session, we are running the legislation to implement recommendations that have come from the work that we did on that bill.
Good.
So,
good. And that's a significant impact to you too, because that means a lot to all the schools in Colorado.
Yes.
178 school districts we have in Colorado. And those state tests affect each and every one of those schools, whether they're rural, whether they're metro area, large, small, doesn't matter. It's everybody. So
That's exactly
well
right.
done on that. Yeah, it was a labor. I think the persistence that you have to keep showing up, to keep going back, showing up's half the battle, I think,
That's right.
as I've watched that one go through.
I think persistent opposition believes at times that they can wear you down.
Right.
And when you keep showing up with a smile, with your sleeves rolled up, and always a willingness to work. Right. And also the way you talk about people with whom you disagree on these projects, all of that matters. And when you continue to be respectful with those individuals with whom you disagree and are having hard conversations with, whether you're in their presence or speaking about it publicly, you're positive and professional. It's, I would say it's disarming and completely helpful to your cause.
Well, because if you're standing there and calling someone not so nice names, you might not get invited back to have another conversation. That is so true. Simple things that we probably learned as children, we carry forward into adulthood and especially into leadership. Talk about, I know with negotiations with the bills that you work on. Talk about where your line in the sand is to keep your true north. Because we all have those, how far is too far? What will it mean if this becomes too watered down? Do you have those things that cause you to lose sleep at night when you're having to have those negotiations with people? The give and take.
Yes, actually, no. So something, I would suspect that this is the same in politics as it is in education and in other areas of business when you're in intense negotiations. I think it's important to understand that many times we start off wanting the entire loaf. and having a recognition that at the end of the day, if I can finish off and with a deal that gets me more than what I started with, I'm going to call that a win because I can come back again. And perhaps what I won the first time is a proof of concept. So if there are relationships to build or trust to build, when I come back and I show that the first things that I asked for were reasonable and actually yielded positive impact, that the path is easier going forward. You win more supporters, more people to your cause, and you wear down your opposition because you are able to show that maybe some of the naysayers didn't get it right. The apocalypse didn't happen when you were able to implement the initial things that you negotiated. So I think a mistake that many people make is assuming that you go in and you're going to draw a line and here and no further. And I have found that style of negotiating is completely counterproductive because it sets up a zero-sum game and also is really hard to build relationships. Politics, business, human relationships, it's all human relationships. And we might start off disagreeing. And then again, I said this earlier in your podcast, but at times, sometimes those people who start off as your biggest foes, somehow you get there and they wind up being your partners and your bigger champions later.
Yeah, I call it the loyal opposition. You know, if it's the loyal opposition, these folks may start out disagreeing with you on stuff, but I think if you work through it as a leader, a lot of times there's different points of view. If nothing else, you might be left with mutual respect, given that both people are reasonable.
Yes.
So, and sometimes being rational with irrational people is just a hard thing. So I know in your work as a leader, just like in mine, there have been times I've come across some not so nice people. And so how far do you take that? You know, I know you still have to be professional. You still have to be the adult in the room a lot of times.
Yes.
But those are hard moments for leaders.
Well, there are times when not everybody is coming to the table in good faith. And I would just recommend to anybody to trust your sense and understand, be aware when that's happening. And those are individuals, again, you treat them respectfully, but then you limit your time working with them. And I have had to do that a few times. I would say for myself, I think I've applied that well. There probably are only about 3 people in about my 10 years of service to our community.
Number. Yeah.
It is a small number where people truly are just coming for their own ends, maybe 3 or 4 people. And those are individuals who I, of course, remain respectful towards, but am not seeking opportunities to work with them. And when one is trying to solve a problem, there are hundreds of people who would like to be heard, and you have only so much time. You need to invest your time on those who are, again, as I said, are coming to the table in good faith and have something productive to share. You can't get your time back. And if you're a professional or an elected official, your greatest value is the time that you have. Maximize it. Limit your time with people who are not productive and who are not coming in good faith. And particularly limit your time to those who intend only damage to the effort.
Yeah. Do you feel like there are a few people out there who really are trying to create something so that you meet your demise in terms of your political career or your leadership career? I think these are the ones we're talking about.
Yes.
Because they have a question behind the question, right?
100%. There are some people who are committed to an agenda and they're not necessarily attempting to solve a problem.
Right.
They're committed to proving that they are right and to achieving an agenda, never mind what the whole rest of the world is hoping you will do. Most people just want good solutions that don't cost a lot of money, that make the most number of people happy.
Common sense, maybe?
Common sense solutions, yes. There are some in my line of work who are very ideologically driven or really are only seeking to benefit their specific group that they're advocating for. And that isn't my job. My job will be to learn as much as I can from people, but also my job is to represent the 87,000 people who are in my House district. And I'm not going to get there by swallowing hook, line, and sinker a solution that is offered by somebody, or rather demanded by anybody who is trying to drive an ideology or a specific agenda for a specific group.
Yeah, and demand is an interesting word. I feel like over time, and you've seen this in the last decade, things have become more and more polarized in society, in our country, not just our state, but our country. And that all comes to the table, whether it's public schools or private schools or, the legislature, the State Board of Education, any of those. And I've thought a lot about how do you bring those different sides together. The outliers, the ones that have no good agenda intended, I think we sort of have to let that go.
Agree.
Right? And it's hard because sometimes they're the loudest, right? The squeaky wheels out there. But then bringing the rest together, I think there's power in numbers, and there's more power the more common ground you can find with people, regardless of whether they're an R or a D or unaffiliated or whatever it may be. How do you manage that? Because I know even within the same political party, for example, you may have run on having to listen to people who may not have even voted for you this go around, even though you've won handily every single time, which has been a great statement and testament to you. And I think part of that is because you're realistic and moderate. You hear all sides. But for those people who are, they have a certain tribe who follows them, I just don't know how that works out behind the scenes when you're trying to lead in your party like that.
One thing that is great about political campaigns, and this, perhaps there's an analogous situation for leaders in education and in business, but for us in politics, a key part of our job during a campaign is to go out and knock on people's doors. And you go, and what I ask everyone after introducing myself is, what do you hope that your government will be doing for you? What do you hope to see? What are the things you care about? What do you want? What do you hope I'll work on your behalf? And to hear people's answers and then to engage in a conversation with that curiosity to learn about what people care about and understand not only what they care about, but what their perspective is about this. Because again, I only have my limited perspective. I have my life experience, but I don't know what they've seen in their lives. And I don't know who their neighbors are. I don't know what their job is or what their family was like. I'm there to learn. And it's been such a blessing to have that opportunity. And it helps me learn more about myself even because I reflect on those conversations. To such an extent, I look at our city, Dr. Swanson, as it's like a quilt for me. Each square, I remember the stories of people who I've spoken with. I remember the mom with the son who was blind and an adult, and she's aging and doesn't know how he's going to afford a place to stay in our city. The preschool teacher who was married for 30 years and she got a divorce from her husband and isn't going to be able to keep her home, in which they raise their kids. So I have this advantage of those real person-to-person conversations. And I remember what I told them. I remember what I said to them when they shared with me what they cared about. And that's who I've committed to show up to be when I'm at the Capitol. I am that same person. I don't deviate from who I told that person I was going to be on their behalf at the Capitol. And that makes it eminently more easy and more reasonable to work with my colleagues. Sometimes I'm the only one with a backbone to say no when the answer is wrong. But when I do that, it is true. When I'm able to stand up and be strong, that gives strength to my colleagues who see where I'm at and my why. It helps them remember their why and to realize, well, the apocalypse didn't happen when Representative Bird stood up and said no. Maybe I can say no too, or maybe I can support this other answer because she came back, she got reelected even, and actually her win margin was bigger. So sometimes not only do you feel good when you do the right thing? You stand up, you might be the only voice, but you are empowering others to do exactly the same thing.
Yeah, and that's called leadership. I think was it Teddy Roosevelt? Who was it that said one definition of leadership is taking people to places they wouldn't normally go by themselves.
I like that.
Right?
Yes.
And so somebody has to be the first a lot of times to stand up and do that. And it does take courage.
That's right.
It does take courage to do that. You were talking about representing and not deviating from that person and hearing those stories. Talk about how your own life, how your own childhood has shaped you into the leader you are today. What are the things, when you were talking about those stories a few minutes ago, what are the stories you carry with you that are just in here every day? We all have them, and they're based on our experience base and where we grew up and the influences we had in our lives, the people we had in our lives. Who was influential for you?
So I was raised by my grandmother, who had a ninth grade education, and my mother, who finished high school. Single mom. And what I learned from them was the value of hard work and independence, and then also how critical it is to get your education. As my bio has told you, I learned well from them. Yeah. But I learned from them that really what matters is working hard, being true to yourself, and keep persisting. You keep trying. You keep after it. Trust yourself, have faith in yourself, and build relationships. Oh, something else too. Treat people well. Be respectful.
Yeah.
And that has...
Good manners.
Yes, good manners. I think you said this earlier, but all of the rules to be successful as a leader, as an elected official, I think you learn them before you're 5 years old.
Yeah.
And if you can just simply remember them, we might state them differently to our kids when we're younger. We might see those rules differently, but just basic rules of engagement. Those were rules that were pounded into my mind as a kid, and lessons that never left me. And so when you put that all together, it really has been a recipe, at least for me, to be able to do some big things for my community.
Yeah. Well, I know you also are like every other leader I know. Everybody's busy as a leader. We have 5 million plates in the air that we're spinning at the same time. Every time I turn around, you've got a Saturday town hall going here. You're doing something like we're doing today.
Right.
And then still the legislature has it kicked off yet? Is kicking off? Yeah.
Wednesday. We just did last week.
And so here you are back in the throes of all that. And that may seem like a long time in the legislative season in Colorado, but it seems like it goes by pretty darn fast too when you're trying to get things done and across the finish line. How do you keep your balance? That's the question I want to know.
Well, first, I do want to say I love what I do. And
that helps.
The longer I do this, the more I realize I only have a very short amount of time to get big things done, because in Colorado, we're term limited. So I'm in my final 2 years of service. So I just have another 2-year window guaranteed to me to be able to deliver big for the people who are counting on me.
I mean, you were far from done. You've got a lot of mileage left on that odometer. I'll just say that.
Well, I hope so. Who knows what happens after 2 years? But you are right, though. There has to be balance, because if you aren't taking care of yourself, then you aren't able to think. You aren't able to be proactive. If you find yourself out of balance, at least for me, I find myself being simply reactive. I'm not able to be in that space where I'm crafting a proactive agenda. And something I keep in mind, and I say this as a woman of shorter stature, that I learned, everybody else is really busy trying to get to where they want to go. And if I spend my way only getting out of other people's way and reacting to what they throw my way, then I haven't gotten to where I want to go.
Yeah.
And that exact analogy applies to the need for balance and how you need to set boundaries. So the things I have been prioritizing, and I'm still learning, I don't have all of the answers, but I know that sleep is crucial.
It is.
You must get your sleep. You also must exercise. And I don't care how much you love what you're doing, how curious you are to go take the next meeting, go to the next dinner, go to the next event. you have to say no sometimes. You must cut out times for yourself, either to get the sleep or to do the prep and to be proactive. The other thing I would just encourage everybody is don't forget your family. If you're married, if you have kids, and also don't forget your friends, because where you are right now, it's not going to be forever.
No.
And when you're done, you want to be able to turn back around and celebrate with those people who helped you get where you are. And, if you've got kids, you will never get that time back with your kids. You have to prioritize them. This has been a message for me that I've taken to my heart. I mean, I stepped away from my career as an attorney because I knew I was never going to get that chance to make a choice again.
Yeah.
How I spent that time when they were infants, toddlers, just young people growing up. So all of those rules apply. Don't forget your North Star as a human being. That has to be sacrosanct. I once worked for a partner in my very first law firm, and he I don't think did a very good job with this balance. He had always said, well, of course your family and your kids are the most important things in your life, but right now our work today is the most urgent. And I would just say you've got to flip that on its head. Your family and the fleeting time that you have with them truly is what's most urgent. So make sure you protect it.
Yeah. So try to stay married. There's a message,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
That's true even in graduate school and things like that. If people are pursuing doctoral degrees, and I always would tease my team, try to stay married because it takes a big toll. And you're right. If you turn around and none of those people are there, then what have you done all this work for, really, in the end, right? So don't forget who brought you to the party, I guess is another way to say it. My grandmother, she, God rest her soul, her name was Maybelle. She was born in 1903. She had 10 children. My mother was one of 10. My mom just celebrated her 95th birthday. And I asked my grandmother one time, when I had one daughter, and I said, Maybelle, you had 10 kids. I've got one and I'm working and it's all I can do. How did you deal with all this? Just trying to learn something. And she just looked at me and she said, it's better to run through the fire than to crawl through it.
That's great.
I've never forgotten that. I mean, I'm from the South, right? So that's how she framed that. And she just laughed, and I just thought to myself, wow, you have such things that you didn't really think too much about when you were younger. And then you become that adult. And then you look back and you say, wow, how did our parents do it? How did our grandparents do it? How did my grandmother with 10 children do it? Right. And somehow we get it done.
Yep. You don't think about it. You just get it done.
You just get it done. Right. Mm-hmm. Isn't that the way that goes?
Yes.
So Shannon, talk for a minute about, what has surprised you in this leadership work? What has challenged you? What have been some of your bumps in the road or your challenges? Because I think it's important for anyone listening or watching to understand that, leadership's worth it. But everybody would do it if it was really that easy, right? So you're going to have those moments where you have to learn. You have to fail in order to learn or relearn. What have some of those challenges been like for you in the legislature and
so
council?
I'd like to give a positive and then the challenge. So I'll come back to the positive. So we end on this conversation on a high note. But I think the biggest challenge that I was surprised about was when you disagree with people who are closer to you in your line of work, how shocked they are by it and how mad they can get.
Uh-huh.
And I have just, in politics, that is, I think, has been what has surprised me. So that you can have people who you believe are in your camp who are closer to the way that you think, ideologically speaking. And then when you step out and you say, well, wait a minute, that's too much. That's too far. Or had we thought about doing the same thing this way? How much there seems to be a need for people in a camp to have to all think the same. And I don't know if it's that people have a need for others to share their opinion because they need you to validate their perspective and their ideology, or just that they're shocked. I haven't figured out what the
they
why
get their feelings hurt, maybe.
But that it seems to be, it is interesting that it seems to be the closer you start off with some individuals in a group, that when you disagree with them, they will judge you more harshly than they'll judge somebody else who wasn't in the camp, who disagrees with them almost all the time, but they'll fall in love with that person for agreeing with them maybe 10% of the time. Yet you, who'd been part of their camp, for disagreeing maybe even 5% of the time, if even that you are judged more harshly.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's only politics or if that's other lines of work.
I think it's beyond politics, because that rings true in my head. Someone told me one time, the people who can hurt you the most are the ones you're closest to.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that's true. When I've had our kids tell me the brutal truth, they can cut you like a knife.
If you're saying it's the same in other areas, I guess that makes me feel better. But it came really as a shock that I don't know if it's tribal thinking, but that, this idea that, if we're on a team, we can't ever disagree. And that's not good leadership. That there has to be space in a healthy, productive team that's going to get good work done for people to step out and say, wait a minute, I think we might not be on the right path here. The people we're trying to solve problems for, I don't think they're going to get what you think we're going to get out of this. Or I don't think they're going to see this the same way, that maybe we have a less expensive path forward, or something that, is much more community building oriented, that there's some other way to solve this, that there has to be space within groups for people to be able to do that, and without demonizing those. And too often that happens. And I say that, but for anybody listening, I'm fine in my position and in my party, been reelected again, renominated for my role. So all of this at the end of the day has worked out okay for me, but it really was an eye-opening situation for me.
It's making the sausage, isn't it?
It is. It is. Yes.
It is eye-opening.
Oh, I do want to tell you, okay, here's the positive.
Okay.
So I don't think people are as polarized as we think we are. So I will say this from a perspective of an elected official, that I know from knocking on doors and to talking to people who are decidedly not in my camp, that when I show a willingness to listen to them and I don't judge them for having a different opinion, how grateful they are to know that not everybody is angry with them for thinking differently. And I have so many people who continue to vote for me, even though they probably disagree with about half of the votes that I cast in our state's capital. So I say that, and I'll tell you, working with both my Democrat and Republican colleagues, there are so many places that we agree. And I would say it's the majority of issues where your elected officials are agreeing. We work together in ways that aren't seen. It's just not publicized. So I hope everybody who is worried about the state of our politics and our country, I can't believe that this is only happening in Colorado, that we do get along and we aren't as polarized as we think.
Yeah, I think sometimes that's fueled by things we hear in the media. And certainly in a big election year, that was nonstop, that news cycle. I think people were kind of weary from it all.
It's what sells, I think.
Yeah, it's what sells. That's exactly right. So, well, Shannon, I just appreciate you being with us. I think what you've helped us learn are two things today. Leadership is leadership no matter where you are and what industry you're in. And even if it's at the volunteer level and volunteering for, there are a number of people I know volunteering to help with things like local bond elections and mill levy overrides and things like that, but finding your cause. So that's one. And I hope folks who are listening got that piece of wisdom from you. The second one, though, I think is really important when you're talking about maybe not being as polarized as we think we are. Politics really is local. It really gets down to just being local. It's what's happening on your front doorstep almost.
Yes.
For the most part. And I appreciate you. I appreciate your advocacy for education and all the other things that really do matter, especially for a lot of vulnerable populations. And so I would also like to thank the entrusted audience today for taking some time to listen or to view, whichever way you get your information. And like I used to say to my former team at the end of every important meeting, rock on with your bad selves. It's important work.